Welcome to The Forecast, a podcast by Rain the Growth Agency. I'm your host, Morgan Willis. Today, I'm joined by Will Parker, Chief Strategy Officer of Lebend, a marketing measurement technology leader. Will leads client strategy, combining data analytics and marketing to help clients address the complex challenges of marketing effectiveness and ROI. In our discussion today, we'll be chatting about marketing mix models, how AI is advancing modeling and data, and why marketing measurement is even more critical in today's world. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. So, Will, at Lebend, you provide marketing measurement solutions, namely marketing mix modeling. For those who might not know, what is a marketing mix model or an MMM?
So an MMM is a way for us to understand historically how your media mix has impacted sales. It differs a little from what most people are probably familiar with, attribution. Attribution modeling or attribution analytics is a deterministic analytics where you have something where you're able to tie ad exposure to an ad sale deterministically, directly. So usually using some kind of pixel or tracking solution. What MMM does is kind of the opposite of that. What we do is we start with your revenue, and then we use a series of statistical modeling, probabilistic modeling, to understand how an ad exposure leads to a sale. So it's also referred to as kind of a top-down approach, where we understand historically where sales have happened, and then try to tie that to some sort of media exposure.
Right. So in contrast to, kind of the normal way that a business would see that its ad is working. Let's say they have a CPO as a KPI and they're tying their impressions back to orders. And then they're calculating the CPO based on that. Your method is a little more complex, it sounds like, and maybe a little more holistic. Can you give me, kind of a use case? How would a company use an MMM?
Yeah, so we take in not only ad spend and impressions and things like that. We are best served for clients that have things that are a little harder to measure. So if all of your sales happen online on a website that you own, you're a D2C company, and you're primarily using Google and Meta and TikTok, all things that are very easy to measure through deterministic attribution, you might not need an MMM. But if you have anything like, TV, offline media, or if you're driving to an offline sales, obviously if a consumer is buying at Walmart, there's no pixel there to track. So it gets very complicated in how we track that. So while there are some deterministic approaches there, working with some partners that can tie, a club card or a email address you enter when you buy a product to ad exposure online, that gets very, very complex incredibly quickly. We're able to kind of skip that whole step. Another real benefit of using MMMs is we don't leverage any consumer data. There's no PII, there's no customer surveillance, there's no tracking, none of that. So for some of our clients, like our banking clients who don't like tracking that, or healthcare clients who can't track that, we're able to tie, without touching any consumer information, a sale or a lead to ad exposure.
Now, when I've worked with MMMs, at least on my end, I work in CTV and streaming, we usually get the results of an MMM after the campaign has concluded. On the LinkedIn sphere, I've heard some talk about, they could do MMMs maybe during a campaign, maybe they could have some sort of real-time MMM in the future. What are your thoughts on, if there's a future in getting MMM results quicker?
It gets tricky real fast. I think the biggest hurdle to overcome is processing data and how quickly you can process that. And we're getting much, much better at that. So, here at Lebend, we do a near real-time MMM. The other thing you're really going up against is the math itself, the stats. So what we're looking at is a number of observations and then a number of things that could drive those things to happen. So if you're looking at daily sales, every day would be a single observation. And so you need to have multiple observations in order to statistically significantly tie a sales to the ad exposure. So it gets really tricky when I hear, companies talking about, real-time or in-campaign results, because, a lot of times it's also just not how media works. And so, especially when you're looking at like, CTV and linear TV and that kind of space, if there is a decay on the media, you're going to see sales coming in over a period of days, weeks, months. Getting things in campaign real time gets pretty tricky. We have some ways that we can combat that, though. So, one thing we'll do is we'll develop a model we feel confident in and then track it real time and see if the results are pacing to what we expected to happen. And then we can say, all right, I believe that, all the S curves and all your contributions are holding up based on prior expectations. But if you're moving into something entirely new, something you've never done before, you turn TV on tomorrow for the first time, I'd be pretty hard pressed to trust an MMM to give you results real time.
It sounds like, from what you're telling me, that the idea that they're going to have a real-time MMM is maybe more wishful thinking rather than reality.
A little bit. I mean, and then this also comes as part of your suite of tools that you're using. So if you have multiple things that are analyzing your campaign in market real time, then I probably would trust your MMM a little more. If historically we know what kind of results we expect to see through an attribution or an incrementality test, and it ties to some sort of results we're seeing within our MMM, and we see similar results across the first two, and the third one is giving us further confidence in what's happening, then I think we can trust it. I think one of the biggest issues with this, there's lots of issues with this, but we have this idea of what is true and what happened as being binary. And I think within marketing analytics, we need to think of it more as building trust in what we think we know. And so it's not that, because the MMM says this, therefore it is true. That trust gets built over a period of time. And so we have some clients we've been working with for several years, and we've built that trust, both with, us as a company, but also with the model itself, that this model has continually predict accurately for 2 years. It predicting accurately next week, high likelihood. But if you're turning on a model tomorrow, I think there's a lot of work to be done to build that trust.
Right. Now, if a brand is using deterministic attribution, let's say that they are relying on cost per order as provided to them by the DSP that they're using. And, let's say this brand is selling a product at Walmart, as you mentioned. Now, if that brand is looking to, maybe have a little bit more information in their analytics, looking for something a little more complex that will show those sales that are in store at Walmart, not just online, and they're looking for an MMM, would you recommend that brand keep looking at deterministic attribution in addition to the MMM, or are they two separate pieces here?
Oh, they definitely work together. I think they're kind of two sides of the measurement coin of precision versus accuracy. And so I found MMMs tend to be a far more accurate account of what is happening. Now, because of some of the strengths we have with modeling, we might not be able to get as precise as you can get within an MTA. You're not going to get down to a daily campaign level and getting that feed that everybody's kind of been hooked on. But we're able to account for a lot of market factors and business factors that your MTA is not accounting for. And so what we've done with a lot of our brands is we'll help them calibrate their MTAs. And so we will, through historical modeling, understand, all right, for every dollar Meta says that they're giving you, it's actually $1.20. Or for every dollar that Google says they're giving you, it's actually 80 cents because they're not accounting for these other factors. And so that's a way to kind of help your MTA by calibrating it with your MMM and then checking in periodically to reconcile those.
So an MMM, rather than being a replacement for deterministic attribution, is really more like another piece of your attribution analytics universe. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if you just kind of think through the consumer journey, for some brands, it's more needed than others. We see this for, like, as you mentioned, Walmart. So if there's a lot of research happening online and they're engaging with their ads online, but they go purchase offline, that's just a black box. And tying those things together deterministically is a little difficult. So your online media might not be getting as much credit as it should be getting. And then similarly with TV, we have a lot of clients that use, a lot of attribution solutions to tie their TV to sales. But what happens if, you might be doing that through IP matching, for instance? We know through ACR that you watched an ad on your home TV, and we can tie that to a sale through your IP address. All great. But what if that purchase happened while you were at your mom's house or at another IP address? Like, there's just all of these what if scenarios that happen within deterministic that you have to account for every single one of those. Whereas with MMMs, it kind of all comes out in the wash. Because we know that the exposure happened, and we can tie that to a sale with a degree of certainty.
It sounds like you're getting a much more accurate representation of real-time sales data, just as you mentioned. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of companies out there thinking about using an MMM, but at the same time, as I'm sure you and most people in the advertising world know, there are a lot of forecasts showing how brands are cutting advertising due to economic factors. Why do you think now is the perfect time to think about modeling?
Well, when you look at a lot of the research out there on when you should be spending money, it's when other people aren't. And so usually during recessions, this is the time where we see real separations between brands. The brands that stay on with their advertising are able to capture more share of voice. And some of the research coming out of Binet and Fields talking about how your share of voice within the marketplace is equal to your share of market. As you increase your share of voice, you're increasing your share of market. And share of voice being a share of market that are share of your advertising market that you're capturing. As other people reduce their spend, if you keep yours consistent or even raise yours, you're kind of getting free eyeballs out of that at a free percentage point. And so now's the time to really invest. Or if you are going to cut, make sure what you're cutting is actually, things that don't really drive your business. And so if you're just looking at your deterministic models, if you're just looking at your attribution, there might be media that is driving sales that is just not on your radar. And that's especially the offline media. We did some analysis recently with a brand where, 30% of their sales were coming in organically. So they thought that it wasn't being tied to any other media. And we found over half of that was TV. And so if you looked at just how TV was performing in their other analyses, it's one of their underperforming vehicles. But because it was so hard for them to track deterministically, it wasn't getting the credit that it deserved. We found that you actually not only shouldn't cut TV, you should reinvest in it. And then you can also look within the channel itself. If we're looking to cut TV, we have some tools that we use called Ad Impact, where we can look at station day part analyses. So just don't cut across the board. We did a pretty big case study with a major brand who was nervous about kind of trusting this type of modeling. And what we told them was, all right, don't invest where we tell you to invest, just cut where we recommend to cut. And let's wait, 6 weeks. And so we did that, and their business kind of chugged on as usual, cutting 30% of their TV spend. And so that gave them the confidence of, well, if you were to invest that 30% in the places the model is recommending to invest, what do we think would happen? And, we saw their ROI increase by 30% really quickly.
Going back to the story you told about that brand that thought that 30% of its sales were organic, but they were actually coming from linear TV, that is really fascinating to me. Working in upper funnel media, we often do see that when you look at deterministic attribution, it looks like it's not doing as well, especially compared to lower funnel conversion methods like display or search ads, etc. But a lot of that is because it's harder to measure, right? Somebody's not just clicking on a streaming or linear TV ad. They are maybe watching the ad a few times, and then they eventually click on a search ad, or they go in store to buy the product. So it seems as though this is a really good use case for companies that are thinking about cutting advertising, as you mentioned, to really see which channels are working and which channels aren't.
Yeah, and I think it's important to hold all your media accountable. So I come from the brand media space. I spent the first half of my career at, big CPG agencies like Publicis working on P&G. And I'd get so frustrated when I'd see the objective of a campaign be simply awareness. A upper funnel brand campaign can drive sales and should drive sales. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that actually drives better sales than your performance media. Performance media is incredibly important to capture people who are in market right now, but there's such a small pool to work from that your brand media getting net new eyeballs and net new consumers into your purchase path, that's really where growth happens. And if you're not holding your brand media accountable and you're just letting them skate by on, brand health metrics alone, I think that's a real miss. They should be driving sales just like everybody else.
You hear those stories about companies that will, look at the data, usually deterministic data, and say, okay, well, display is driving a ROAS that's 10 times higher than anything else. So we're going to cut everything except for display. We're going to cut out all of our upper funnel media. And then month over month over month, their revenue goes down. And that's due to what you just said. Their upper funnel media often works harder. It gets more eyeballs on it. It is a really good metric for both awareness and lower funnel conversion. So you do need to look at more than just what the deterministic data is telling you.
Morgan, you just hit it right there. I mean, the amount of times I see the recommendation be, go spend more in display. I want to pull my hair out. I think this is why it's also so important to work with a partner that understands media. We've seen a proliferation of this MMM space of all these new kind of data analytics providers that only approach it from a math perspective. And, I really think it's not a math problem we're solving. These are marketing problems. And I have a degree in marketing, and there's a reason why I didn't come from the science department, came from the humanities department. And it's because it's not a straight math problem. Like, you can't drop an algorithm on this and let the machines decide, because you're going to get recommendations like that. I see a lot of recommendations in my past life before I was building MMM myself of go buy more brand search. That's where all your money's coming from. I mean, of course, that's where your money's coming from. Somebody's looking for your brand and they're going to convert and it all looks great and gravy. But, no one wakes up in the morning and thinks, Rothy's shoes. Something drove them to do that, and something drove them to go type that into the search box. And so, what we do here at Levend is we always do submodels on any of the demand capture vehicles, things like branded search, things like retargeting, things like affiliate couponing, where, affiliate couponing isn't driving new sales. It's typically somebody who's ready to make a purchase and then goes hunting around for a discount. And so you're going to see high correlations between the affiliate coupon activity and the sales activity, but you really got to pull that apart and see what's driving that search.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how Levend is sort of taking advantage of this AI revolution, how that's informing your new products?
Yeah, I think as things change, the more they stay the same, and kind of learning from the past becomes more and more important. Every couple years or so, there's always this new big shiny object that everybody's racing towards. But with AI here at Levend, we've been doing a lot of narrow AI from the beginning, machine learning, things like that. So really hyper focused on when is it appropriate to bring in machine learning and then large language models, that being something entirely different, to how we configure and build our models, and when is it not appropriate. So here at Levend, we're still processing all of our models directly, not really letting AI touch any of that. But for inputs for our analysts, we have a lot of tools at their disposal for making recommendations. What kind is the decay or saturation? What kind of additional data should they bring in? Where have we seen success in the past and things like that? And then on the back end, as we're tuning our models, getting very narrow into how we can get decay and saturation down to a finer point, letting our AI help us there. But for the most part, I'm still a little hesitant to fully trust the AI gods with all of our data.
I think there's still a long way to go there.
Yeah,
fully trusting.
Honestly, it makes me a little nervous. I mean, I see there's so much great work coming out of Meta and Google with Meridian and Robin and Meridian respectively. Really showing that I think everybody's embracing that this is a very important thing, MMMs, for us to understand. But then I also then see people layering AI on top of that, and for the sake of ease, that just kind of anybody can just go plug in some data and plug in some outputs, and it just magically tells you where to move your money. I think you're loading that gun and handing it around for anybody to use, and it just makes me a little nervous. So I think as people start using AI to get to better models and get to better results, I think it's more critical now than ever to really interrogate how that model came up with what it came up with.
Right. Now, on the show so far, we've talked a lot about why measurement isn't just about data, but really needs to be understood by true marketing experts. This is something that you're clearly passionate about. I'd love to understand, a little bit more about why you're passionate about that, and how you came into your role at Levend.
Yeah, so I think, like most modern professionals, a lot of us have become so focused on the output that we haven't really dug into the craft of what we do. And there's so much good data and research and things that our industry knows that we don't take into our daily lives as marketers. I always say that, if you're walking into a campaign with only questions, that's a problem. Like there's things that we should know. And if you don't know those things as a brand, then developing a learning agenda and building a way to learn those and build that institutional knowledge is incredibly important. But as an industry, I think we have a lot of institutional knowledge as well. And so just walking in and just testing everything all the time, it's the Silicon Valley mythos of, move fast and break things and try everything and throw everything away and let's just start at the beginning. We have, almost 100 years of history as an industry. And a lot of the research, I mentioned Benet and Fields and Byron Sharp and all these industry icons of today have been doing is telling us we kind of knew what we were doing in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And a lot of that didn't really change, storytelling is still critical. Emotional resonance is still critical. Getting net new reach is critical. And a lot of that is coming up against what platforms are telling us, which tends to be the opposite of that. You need to be doing this micro-targeting and you need all this data. And it sounds good, but that's also where they make all their money. And so I fear as an industry, we've gone and we've begun to trust the people that are selling us things as opposed to trusting the people who came before us. And we could get so much further by trusting those that came before us, building a domain expertise within ourselves, so that when someone at Meta or Google or TikTok tells us something that is counter to that, we're able to challenge them. And I don't mean that negatively. I think it's important to bring in new thinking. But if, Meta walks in and says that sequential messaging is the most important thing you could ever do, and you need to pay a premium CPM to sequence a message to somebody, which was a huge thing a decade ago we tested at P&G, and we found it was kind of bunk. The funnel exists kind of ish, the purchase funnel, but it happens in a little more chaotic way than we think it does. And spending a 20x premium to have a sequential message on someone, it's not really necessary. That's why we don't talk about it anymore. But there was a time in which that was what everybody was telling us to do from the platforms. And so when I look at all the other new things that they're telling us to do, I'm just a little skeptical. And I think having that industry domain expertise kind of can help, buttress that skepticism.
Will, from what you were telling me, it sounds like a lot of things have changed in the measurement world since you first came into it, and a lot of things have stayed the same. Can you tell me your forecast for, let's say the next 5 years of marketing measurement? How will it change and how will it stay the same?
Well, some of this would be wishful thinking and some of this will be, more doom and gloom, I guess. But on the wishful thinking side, we are seeing the platform's ability to export their data is coming a lot cleaner. And so over the past, 15 years or so, Meta's gotten a lot better about how you can export data. And so all that's very positive. And then I am seeing a lot of kind of your third-party dashboarding providers or your Snowflakes of the world making it easier to integrate all that. The North Star of this has always been how do we get clean data at one spot without having to QA it every second of every day. That's still a lot of what is happening behind the scenes, because a lot of it's also just not easy to do. So, Walmart sales data coming from a DMA level, from a store level, SKU level, all that stuff, that takes time to collect and do and just clean, not even analyze, just get where it needs to go. So my hope in the next 5 years, there's some people that are trying to crack that. Hopefully we can start to crack that. I think democratizing a lot of these more advanced tool set or analytic sets like MMM has been great. So, Robin and Meridian, I think we're getting a lot of interesting things coming out of that. One thing that worries me of it is, I'm worried that it might tarnish some of these as well. If you have too many people in the space who are providing standard services, is that going to begin to tarnish what MMMs are? I mean, I'm a little biased here because that's one of my bread and butter, but we've been doing it for 20, 30 years. It works. We know it works. That it's a tried and true proven methodology. Now, how it's getting executed is changing, and is that going to change the trust in it? So I think that's one thing. And then, as we get AI more integrated into everything, getting answers faster, I think, is great. A lot of it is just searching for that report that was from weeks ago or whatever. And I understand that a lot of it is, it's easy for me to do because I have all of it. But on the brand side, it came in a PowerPoint last quarter and all that stuff. So, we're working on getting everything into one spot, which will be great. But if we can get the data component solved, that's my big question, because forever it's always been garbage in, garbage out. So the moment bad data hits your data lake, that lake is trash, and it takes forever to clean it. So how do we make sure everything's clean going in is still the name of the game.
Will, thanks for coming on to the show.
Appreciate it. Take care.
The Forecast is powered by Rain the Growth Agency, a leading independent advertising agency. I'm your host, Morgan Willis. Art design is by Eric Hernandez, production by Beatrice Livioco. The show is edited by Morgan Willis and Eric Hernandez. Follow along with the show on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to stay in the loop. We'll see you next time.